The conversations around George Floyd and what's happening in the country and the protests and just the timeline of what's happening now. Let's not go through like the whole timeline, but I think one of the interesting things about all of us is that from a leadership perspective, and I should have said at the top of this, the key things that we're trying to talk about in these conversations is race and leadership. Because for far too often that has been a taboo topic. People didn't want to touch it, and now we're just going to open the doors on all of that, and we'll talk about more what that means. But for the context of this call, we're all Black CEOs. We all handle that completely different. We responded to it differently. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome to Text to Table, our 1-year anniversary. Cheers to that.
Cheers to 1 year.
Cheers.
In honor of the 1 year, I am wearing my throwback T-shirt from the very first episode, where I was the one that was really adamant of we have to be in casual wear, stuff people don't normally see us in. So that is what I am doing in honor of the 1 year anniversary. But as a whole, the group for our anniversary, we got our text thread much bigger this week. So we have many, many special co-hosts with us here. Some are familiar Text to Table co-host throwbacks, and others are new ones. So I'm not going to say everybody's name, so people will get to know you over the course of this conversation that we're going to have. And just like any true Black event, if you've seen our flyer, there are a couple of folks missing. And that's just how Black events go sometimes. It translates in the virtual world too. So if they join us, they'll come on and we'll just welcome them in and we'll pick up the conversation like it started.
I mean,
but one caveat, let's give our missing co-host some credit. Dante, he got pulled away for work. You know, you got to earn that paycheck. So he is hustling out there in Vegas. So he won't be with us tonight, but we'll miss him.
We really missed him 1 year. And this is last minute too. It's not like he planned out. That's the life of a CEO, right? You get pulled in, you gotta do what you gotta do. And heaven forbid we don't do what we gotta do.
Right.
So, you've already
it's a whole nother conversation.
Looking out. See, we so good. Anyway, to kick us off, this is the 1 year anniversary of Text to Table, but also it's the 1 year since last summer, where there was a lot happening last summer, particularly the moment around racial reckoning, or I guess that's when people wanted to claim this time as a moment of racial reckoning. I don't know if it had a start point per se. By a show of hands, how many feel, looking at where we are today, do you feel that we are where you would hope we would be when the moments of last year happened? So do you feel like we are where you thought we could be a year later in terms of the society and workplaces, of diversity? Show of hands. We got one, and then we doing this.
I can break it down why my hand is up.
Why is your hand up, Michelle?
So my hand is up because I think we were talking about how we were a little suspect about how it was going to be and how long this is going to last. And I think where we are now is I had low expectations. And I feel like we have progressed. We're by far nowhere near where we need to be, but there's still enough of that guilt that's working in our favor. There's still enough of the conversations working in our favor. And there is a lot of lip service that's still out there, but it's still working in our favor. But we're still in a place where we can do this, have this kind of a conversation, and the target on our back is not as big as it would have been a year plus ago. So for that, I'll put my hand up.
Yeah. It's a great point.
Sheri and Katrina, y'all, we had some like, what was this? What was going on here?
This, for me, it's an issue of momentum. I mean, it's similar to what Michelle just said. It's, I think that last year was an awakening for folks because we had a change in administration in Washington, D.C., where some things were more apparent to a group of folks than it had been in the past, that things really hadn't changed all that much. And so, you know, from my perspective, there's a lot of statements made, a lot of claims, but let's not lose the momentum, right? Let's make sure that all of that effort and all of that pain isn't for naught. And so I am cautiously optimistic because I still think there's opportunity, but all that can be washed away and forgotten, just like it's been for so many years.
Mm-hmm. And Katrina, could you introduce yourself for all of our guests when you speak? Just introduce yourself so our viewers know who you are.
Sure. I'm Katrina Holland, everybody.
CEO.
I'm CEO, Chief Executive Officer of the American College of Nurse Midwives.
Chief Executive Officer.
That's
everybody up in here.
Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Sheri, Sesay-Tuffour, CEO of the Pediatric Nursing Certification Board. So Urban, I did give you a little bit of a wave because I think that there has been a true awakening because we have visualized something that we knew was happening, but we could never really get our hands around it. And it was publicly visualized for the world to see. So now we know it's real and those hidden agendas have been brought forth. However, I think as a people, we tend to get comfortable. And, you know, at that moment, there was heightened awareness, public comments, people were more cognizant, people were more sensitive. They would speak up more on others' behalf. But again, we've gone back into a comfort zone. So I think there's still a lot more work to do.
Yeah, I'll just jump in. There's so much more work to do. And after seeing the news reports of what's happening in Texas with reframing what and who the Klan is, it's just like these steps are going backwards. And so it's disheartening. Yes, the conversation is open. And I think that more people are ready to speak up. There are also more people ready to pull us back. And so that's the part that's disheartening for me.
And this is Karl Reid. I was the former CEO of the National Society of Black Engineers and now the Chief Inclusion Officer at Northeastern University. And I think part of the change that I experience is a change, a wave across the country that many of the organizations are investing, not just speaking out. So the first wave was were the pledges, the statements. Second were the financial pledges. The third was an intentionality of a lot of these organizations hiring. So they decided that they were going to put their efforts out there. So the National Society of Black Engineers and others saw a huge increase in the number of companies and new partners, et cetera. So they were putting their money where their mouth is. And then, of course, the last wave is the people like me who are being installed in these positions. Now, whether or not, and I'm very fortunate, I have a budget, I have a staff, I have commitment, et cetera, but a lot of organizations are putting these roles in place and not giving them the budget and the resources and authority to make change, to affect true systemic change. And that's really where I think the future is. So I went like this because I didn't know what to expect after the statements were made, et cetera. It was just, I'm having conversations about anti-racism with white CEOs in corporations now that I would have never had. So I guess my expectations, as somebody said, maybe Katrina said, my expectations were low in a lot of ways. And we have exceeded my expectations, but I wasn't really prepared for the backlash that we're experiencing all across the country, voting rights and everything else, critical race theory and the like.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Urban.
Yeah, a question I was going to ask everybody: how many folks in 2019? How many people were regularly speaking about DEI in your role? And then in 2020, how many of us have been speaking about DEI in our role? Stefanie, what were you going to add?
No, so I was going back to the question about where we are and such, and I acknowledge that we've made some progress, but the pushback, the performative, has just increased sort of 2 to 3-fold, and so I feel as though it's 2 steps forward. It was 2 steps forward with having the conversation and having people acknowledge, and 70 steps back. Everything from Rachel, I believe Rachel Nichols and ESPN, and that whole nonsense about, well, I'm tired of it, and you can't tell me that other people are not having those same conversations in their texts and in their private conversations. And that's why I kind of feel disheartened that I would love to say that we're making progress. And I think there are areas where we are, but the pushback and all the things that people are fighting up against doesn't give me hope that this will continue and maintain. I am willing to have my mind changed. I am willing to be surprised. I don't see it yet.
Yeah, and
I think all of these efforts are certainly long-term. I think last year people were forced to deal with it because we were all still working from home in many instances. And now that things are starting to open back up and people are getting back into routines, it's very easy to retreat to bubbles of comfort. And I think that's what's happening. And unfortunately, the problem doesn't go away. I think it's people's willingness to be uncomfortable that people shy away from even more because they can. Last year was very difficult because not only was there the pandemic, but there was everything else that we were watching on TV and on social media and everything else. And I mean, even if you take a look at the Olympics, the fact that the Olympics, is still happening is kind of crazy to me. But that just goes to show you the state of the world right now. So I think that, there's a lot more work to do. I'm just not sure that we're going to have the collective moving the needle as much as it needs to move. And, I don't know where that leaves us, because I certainly don't want to be in a position where we're dragging people along or taking on that burden, because I don't have the time or the energy.
And let me add one more item before we leave this topic, in that, the year or the last few years has changed. Years ago, we were more or less straightforward in our roles as CEOs or executives. So our core responsibility was what? To drive the organization forward and to ensure organizational success. But now we're witnessing how we have a personal responsibility. The role of the executive has changed tremendously. We have a corporate, even a social responsibility to advocate on behalf of social issues that are well beyond our company's corporate social responsibility. So we are expected to answer to a wide range of stakeholders and in a more public way. And many of these individuals, our partners, our members, our consumers, are holding us 100% accountable, especially issues that are impacting topics or people in the area of racial inequalities that continue to plague our nation. So we are different in that we have to think differently, act differently, respond differently, because we and our organizations are being held wholly accountable.
Shout out to Sheri. I think you dropped something on LinkedIn today. You have a piece about this, I believe, too, that's on there, so people can check it out, right? So we've talked about like how the world and organizations are changing. Let's talk about how we have changed. I mean, one thing we're clearly, I loved how we naturally, when we said how many of us have been speaking about it, we all been with double hands on this. Karl, I'm going to turn to you because I think you have a really good example of this. So you said you were the former CEO of an organization. You are now the Chief Inclusion Officer. Tell us about that journey there, where it last year personally for you in that switch.
Yeah, it started happening last June. Of course, May 25th was when George Floyd was murdered. And in June, I got the first call, I recall, to give a talk to a group of executives, engineering executives, et cetera. And I didn't know what I was going to say at the time, but I had some ideas. And so I started to really develop over the course of a few months, kind of a model of thinking about how organizations can move from. So back to your earlier question, in 2019, I think we were talking about diversity and maybe inclusion, but 2020 introduced the whole notion of equity. I think it really it really galvanized, shined the spotlight on equity. So the D and the I probably in my case I was talking about in way back when, but the E really became a large part of the focus. And so over the course of from June to December, I probably gave about 40 or 50 talks from different groups. And as I wrote some things, I blogged some things. And then at some point I realized this is what I want to do for the full time. It became very difficult to kind of balance the day-to-day work of running an association and doing this diversity work outside and changing the way organizations kind of operated and the culture they had. So as a result of that, I had this opportunity that's presented to me at Northeastern to be the inaugural Chief Inclusion Officer. They did not have someone that had cabinet level responsibility over all of inclusion. And the president kind of invited me to join his cabinet. And it was something that really was hard to turn back. And it happened to be also during a time, my wife had already moved to Boston. So I was living in Alexandria. So that made it a lot easier, to accept the job in Boston so we could be in the same city together. So it really was a win-win for our whole family. But I'm seeing this happen quite a bit. A lot of us, the CEO of the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers became the Chief Inclusion Officer, Diversity Officer for another firm as well. Because really, we've been doing this work for many, many years, as Sheri pointed out earlier. And so a lot of companies are saying, hey, these are the kind of people we'd like to have kind of in leadership position in our organization. It's very clear as CEOs, we run organizations, we've built organizations, we've managed teams, we've moved the needle in our space. Why don't we move that into a DEI space as well? And that's really what I'm seeing a lot of.
Yeah. Karl, actually, I have a question for you. So you said that the president asked you to come in to his cabinet. We're seeing that a lot. I'm actually on the board of trustees with Bradley University, my alma mater, and we're hiring a VP of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And this is part of the thing that we're starting to see. Again, these universities specifically, companies, associations have never had this position. And if they have had this position, it's been for HR reasons and because they got sued or something and they need to have the position. Are you getting the resources that you need to really do the true work, or are you a one-man shop expected to fix it?
Yeah, I kind of alluded to this earlier. It's not like I'm getting that somebody bequeathed me resources. I'm demanding resources. And I think that part of the effort was when I walked into this, I said, I'm going to need, this is what, and so you're making the commitment for this to happen. And so I don't wait for somebody to give me, and that's the advantage of being a CEO for 7 years. I don't wait for somebody to give me. I say, this is what I'm going to get in that. And if you don't give it to me as an institution, although Northeastern is really kind of opening up the doors for me to really be the effective CIO that I need to be, Chief Inclusion Officer, but also there are other opportunities for additional funding to supplement that. Because as CEOs, we've also been very, very good at raising money as well. And so bringing in soft money to kind of build up the capacity. So it's a win-win for the university and for us. But that is key. That's a really key fact that anyone that takes these positions has to have the staff, has to have the resource, have to have the presidential attention, the leadership attention in order to make that happen. Because otherwise you will burn out very, very quickly.
Yeah.
I'm curious what Karl said about calling. How many of you all, and anybody can kind of speak to this, how many of you all does it feel like a calling versus an obligation, particularly over the last year? Katrina?
Yeah, when I think about how I've changed, I think that part of what I'm expected to be is the Chief Equity Officer too, right? And the Chief Diversity Officer. And I don't think I realized how comfortable I would be in that position until we started to have some uncomfortable conversations. Because while the board and some members may be committed to diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, to be able to make the right decisions in the moment and have the conversation and challenge each other is something totally different.
Yeah.
And I think this also feeds into this notion of people going the easy route and being very performative. And that's very superficial. But, if you have to be uncomfortable and take a step out on faith to be able to talk about race relations in this country, and acknowledge that it's not just your institution, your organization, it's this country, it's the world. But specifically this country has its own issues. And challenging folks in the moment to dig deep and think about how they think. And so part of that also is, sometimes I think I'm a therapist. Helping people work through their issues.
Yes.
I know if I go back to school, I'm going to psychology.
Katrina, I know people can help you with that.
You got that right.
Oh my gosh.
Katrina, so when you say that helping people through their issues, are you talking about your board members or your members?
Or staff, for that matter.
Because I was just thinking about a situation that I had with our. We issued a statement against Asian American, the violence against Asian American community. And I got a very nasty email from a member in response to it. And it literally was within 5 minutes of the statement going out, with a lot of vitriol that had nothing to do with what the statement actually said. And personally, based on what was there, I was not interested in engaging, educating, coddling, whatever you want to call with this person. I said, thanks, and gave it to the board for you all to address with this person. Is this acceptable or not? And I said, I'm not. And I think where I've changed is in dealing with people like that, I would probably just figure out a way to sort of smooth over the situation and just kind of like keep going. And basically, I just told my board, this is unacceptable. I'm not accepting that. I'm not dealing with people like this. If they're going to approach me, staff, or anyone, they need to come to us in a professional manner with respect, and don't expect me to deal with them, basically, with that person, excuse me. And I probably would not have been as forceful about that and the rejection of that whole situation prior to what had happened.
Aliyah, I wonder if that falls in the I don't have the time nor the energy category, because I saw something like that posted earlier, and I don't know if it was a statement from one of you. There is that duty that we have, right? We do have a duty to make sure we get our leaders on board, because the change has to start at the top. But then there is that I don't have the time nor energy to teach you something that you should have learned a long time ago, or to help you unlearn what you think you know. That in itself is another monster to deal with, especially when someone just doesn't get it, but you know what needs to happen is for the greater good of the organization. So Sean, was that you? Do you want to speak to the I don't have the energy? Because I think that's a little bit of where Aliyah was getting at when it comes to certain people who just don't get it.
I'm like, this would be a good moment to be like, roll the clips.
Can you speak to that?
This is where it's Team Sean or Team Michelle on this particular topic. And I think it depends on the situation, to be honest and to be fair. Certainly in a work situation, if it's a board member or a member of the organization, I'm going to spend the time and try to figure out the best solution possible. If it's a colleague or a friend, absolutely not. I mean, there are resources out there, and I'm one Black person with one perspective. We're not monolithic in any way, shape, or form. So me providing you with what I think is the right thing or the best thing is not necessarily going to be what may apply for Dante, who's not here, or Irving or Michelle. And that's where it gets tricky, because in some instances, I think people are looking for silver bullet solutions, and we don't have those solutions. It's another layer of just responsibility that I'm just not willing to take on. I'm doing my own learning, and that was my awakening. How can I dig deeper and kind of educate myself more on our history? And when I say our history, Black history within this country, because what's taught and how we focus on certain moments throughout the history of this country isn't always accurate. So I'm doing a lot of reading to bring myself up to speed on the things that I could be doing and how can I contribute in a positive way. So I expect my white colleagues to do the same thing. There are tons of resources out there and there are experts out there that can provide that kind of help. It's just not me.
You know, one sort of thing I noticed.
Let me just look up for my board real quick because they did address the situation. So,
yeah, and I want to also just jump in there. Like,
remember.
I do respond to all those messages. So when the people get trigger happy, and it's usually not responding because I'm trying to educate, it's usually responding because they don't expect you to. Trigger happy and they type something and it goes to our general inbox. And then, you know, the team will just forward it to me because I love responding to those messages because they're usually caught off guard. I welcome them to have a conversation. I'm a little passive aggressive or petty, but I love it. Like, it gives me like, woof, like I love it because they just don't expect that. Yeah. And most of the time they shut up. But then there's others that actually want to learn something from that. And so that's why, you know, I'm Team Michelle, because I do feel like there is, and in your question earlier, Irvin, is it our purpose or a calling or whatever the situation was? I find it as, for me, I feel it like a responsibility. And I feel that because, you know, I am the first Black CEO here in 137 years. And when I came into this job, that was not my focus. But that was what I quickly saw became a responsibility, because so many Black people were looking up to me. So many Black people were constantly coming in here and just wanting to say hi as a result. And so that turned into a responsibility. So if I can make it easier for other Black people coming up as a result of having a conversation with white people or anybody else that doesn't understand our struggle, I'm going to take the opportunity to do that.
Yeah, it reminded me, how many of us are the first Black CEO when we were CEOs in our organization? I do shout out to Sheri and Katrina because I think this is this is a very unique. I don't know how often this happens, but Katrina, you preceded Sheri as CEO, so that was 2 Black women as CEOs, which we need more of that in the world.
The other way around.
But for the majority of us, we were the first Black. And Sheri, were you the first? Okay,
yeah.
So you were first. Karl, you going to say something?
I was going to say Team Michelle because sorry, Sean, but
that's all good.
For many folks in my mind, I'm the only one that have a kind of cogent conversation with who looks like me, right? And so I don't approach it sort of. I approach it with an opportunity. When you have meaningful conversations, it challenges your preconceived notions, right, about this. And this is not about, oh, you're not like everybody else kind of conversation. This is that. So I actually go into those conversations listening more, right, and then responding, and trying to. And this is my IBM sales track, which is what is your pain point? And how can I kind of shape this conversation so that you understand how this helps you? Because that's what most people say, what's in it for me? And then they have this false belief that it's a zero sum. Your power means I'm losing power. No, our power together really increases the whole pie. And so, and yeah, you can't have 26,000 of these conversations, but the few conversations that I do have, it's usually eye-opening for them and for me. I learned something as a result. And I'm not going to change everybody's opinion, but I'll learn something from it. And in case, you heard that story about that starfish, all them starfish that washed up on the beach, and this guy throwing one at a time back. And this guy walks up to him and said, you know what? You're not going to change. You're not going to make an impact at all by throwing one starfish at a time. He picked up another starfish, threw it, and said, made a difference for that one. So I'm trying to make a difference for the people that I interact with. And so, yeah, Michelle, I'm with you.
Let me tell you this, on an anniversary, I'm going to come up with something new. And this is my evolution. I am now Team Michonne. I'm going to go in with intentions like Michelle until I think you playing me or you just being lazy, and then I'm going to turn you.
Michonne.
I'm not ready for that.
I am Team Michonne. So if anybody wants to join Team Michonne, you can come with me.
Irving.
Oh my God. I was not ready for that.
I'm going to have to jump on that.
I understand what you're saying, but I think that, ignorance and disrespect are two different things. Yeah. And so like what Sean was saying, I think the situation, it's situational. So I can be, what did you say, McShawn?
Michonne.
I can understand that, but it is situational, but it's also exhausting. And from Sean's perspective, I get it. Yes, we all have that capacity to do this type of work and to have these conversations. But when you realize the enormity of it, and I guess I'm kind of in the starfish a little bit, but you speak like a true inclusion officer. I think it's why is it continuing to be our responsibility to fix people's willful ignorance? Yeah. And that's where I really am challenged and tired of that.
I totally get it.
Have a dialogue. I'm happy to have a productive dialogue with someone who's interested and we want to move forward. But if you're just throwing crap, no.
I agree.
Yeah. One thing I think for me personally, and then I'm going to get y'all take on some other stuff, is this is very subtle, but it was a definite shift that I noticed from last year to this year. I was uncomfortable actually saying white people, like the word white people, like identifying white people as a culture. I think I used other words or talk around it. And then now, kind of in the Michonne camp, like I find myself saying white people more often now. Just to clarify, well, what do you mean? Do you mean what? And let's keep it real. We'll do that behind the scenes text table. Sometimes because our audience is so diverse, we will ask this question. I'll ask this question all the time with them. I'm like, wait, who are we talking to? Is this
you do?
Who are we talking to? Mm-hmm. And again, it's not an either or. You can have a diverse community, but just having the words articulated to say there is a white culture, white people is a change that I've noticed over the years.
Yes. That's interesting. I'm curious why that was uncomfortable for you. That
because
word
I feel it made white people uncomfortable.
I get it.
I understand.
White people, like even saying you're a white person, or in the context of a conversation or diversity, like adding white people in a diversity conversation. I think prior to last year, I felt it made white people uncomfortable. It made that's
okay.
That's why I wasn't.
Okay.
It does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So let's switch gears. The other part that we would text the table is we're not Wendy Williams, but we do hot topics.
Bring it.
So, and one of the things we can say about Text the Table in a year, we have never, each month, we literally have never run short on topics. Like it is insane how many stories around race happen at a national and global scale every day where there's not a shortage of topics for us to talk about. Same thing as is here. So let's kind of do a little rapid round of some stuff that's happened over the last month. Coincidentally, a lot of these intersected my space and the media. So let's talk about Nicole Hannah-Jones. Steffi, I know you're kind of inching at the bit. I feel your energy through this computer. So I'm just gonna throw it to you. Maybe you can just give a little context about it and then drop whatever thoughts you have on it so people understand kind of if people don't know, which I imagine most people would know. But if people don't know, kind of break it down.
Yeah. So very long story short, this extraordinary person who was responsible for the 1619 Project was denied tenure by University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, which hurts my heart because I prefer them over Duke. And then there was just kind of this few weeks and months of just this weird awkwardness about, we're not going to offer you tenure, but no one can really come up with a reason why. And there were people who had lesser credentials who were offered tenure. And then all of a sudden, UNC decided, okay, we're going to offer you tenure. And she said, nah, I'm going to move. I'm going to take my talents to Howard University. And I love everything about it. I actually posted, when she made that decision, I posted on my Instagram that if knowing your worth was a person, it would be Nicole. And I think if anything that came out of this year that I think has stuck with me is knowing that I don't have to sit and take this crap in any environment. I can remove myself. I can remove people from my environment. And if their feelings are hurt, that's okay. They're going to be fine. They'll live. I will get to another group of people. It's okay. But that's what I've taken from this experience. And so I'm just Nicole all the way. And I am loving the people who are like, you know what? You're not just going to give me this job because you just, whether you feel sorry for me or, you felt your hand was forced. You knew I was qualified. You know I'm qualified for that job. And yet, and still, I had to jump through hoops to show you that when other people did not.
I want to add to something that Stefanie shared. Thank you for sharing that context, Stefanie. So, when I read her article, Nicole Hannah, one of the things that she said, she quoted, is that she spent her entire life proving that she belongs in elite white spaces that were not built for Black people, right? So she shared this with one of the media sources. And then she said, I decided I didn't want to do it anymore. Mm-hmm. That, Black professionals should feel free and should feel that they don't have an obligation to continue trying to prove themselves and insert themselves in white institutions that don't want them. And so, it's, you can just feel where she's been, right? But also, you have to give her credit for hanging in there to show others that you have to stay the course, that she was good enough and there was no reason to deny her. And then she got to a place where it wasn't their decision, it was her decision to say, I'm stepping away. So she took back that power. And to me, that was just a powerful movement and a powerful statement on her behalf, that she realized that I have the power. I have everything that you need. And now you've waited too long. And so I'm going to make a decision that's best for me. So it's just a lot to be taken from her story and from the decision that she decided to make to accept tenure at Howard University.
And I hope there are some lessons learned there from UNC Chapel Hill and all universities, to be honest with you, because quite frankly, there aren't enough Black faculty in universities anyway, tenured faculty. And despite the fact that the situation got ugly, they just kept digging in. So the PR nightmare for them, I'm not sure they can recover from that in any way. Their own faculty are pissed off about how, the trustees and the board of governors handled the situation. And it's just interesting to me that no one along the way said, hold up, let's pump the brakes on this and pull back. They just kept going and going and going. And in the end, she trumped them all, no pun intended here, but, she came out on top, and now the university has some damage recovery to do from this. And it's probably going to impact them for some years to come because students may choose not to go there. They're an athletic powerhouse. People may choose not to go and play a sport at the university. So I hope there's a lesson learned in a situation like this, because it could have been handled so very differently.
Yeah. And
they didn't have Karl.
Yeah, hire Karl.
They didn't have Karl. If they had Karl, it would have been different.
It was
Go ahead, Katrina.
What I was going to say is, I think that on the flip side, I hope that this is empowering for people of color who see that despite the story that you're told, that if you go to, historically white institution, do the right things, and, play by the rules, things will open up for you. When in actuality, that's not always the case. And so because of the way this played out publicly, hopefully this empowers, people of color to know that you own your own power and you can wield it as you see fit. And so I think that is also to the difference in where we are now versus where we've been in the past. If you think about, your parents raised you to go to certain schools, get certain grades, do certain things, and everything will work out for you. And don't worry. when in actuality, you have to create your own future. You have to create your own opportunity. And so I think that's on the flip side of this. That's something that, we can consider.
And Michelle and Leah, speaking of like flashbacks of Tech the Table, I was listening to another podcast today with the Sam Sanders, and they had the person who, her name is escaping me, but she's on Star Trek. She's in Space Jam 2. And Hair came up again about power. And and the more conversations I listened to, and then you all had that conversation where hair also is a source of power, and how that is changing, particularly with women, and how they're choosing to identify, kind of breaking the barriers of like what is acceptable that white culture has defined, and changing that.
See my side pony, right? Braids. Sorry. We had a whole conversation about me and braids, so that's why.
Yes, we did. This is where we also will do the roll the tape right here.
Right.
Let's do one other hot topic before we kind of wrap up here. And I don't know, everyone may not be up to date on this one, but if someone can give background, please do. Otherwise, I can do it. But with ESPN and Rachel Nichols and Maria Taylor, does anyone want to give like a quick background that they feel comfortable? Or do you want me to kind of just do a quick synopsis?
I can do it real quick.
Okay.
So there was a recording of Rachel Nichols basically talking ish about.
And Rachel Nichols is white. Maria Taylor.
Yeah, sorry. Rachel Nichols is white, and she was basically complaining, and it was recorded about Maria getting time, and basically because she's Black, and she thought that they were having pressure, and that's why she's getting this opportunity. And basically it was leaked. Anything else, Urban, to add more than that in a sense?
Yeah, she was on a hot mic, and she didn't realize her mic was hot when she made this comment about Maria Taylor. And so she ultimately came back out, apologized and said, what all the perfunctory kind of, comments about that. But it's we know a lot of people sort of believe this, and that their success is based on their ability, their merit, and your success is based on your color.
Yes. Yes.
I think she articulated a fear that we all have, that the people that are in front facing performative behind the scenes, it is one of those, to me, it was, I am team DEI all the way until you come for me. And it affects my house and my table.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's not just by white people, that's by other Black people too.
I mean, I often say to people, people who are out front making the case for DEI who don't look like us, I said, how comfortable will you be when a Black family moves in next door? How comfortable will you be when your kid did not get into the private school, but a Black family did, a Black kid did?
Yep.
That's the real test.
Will you invite us on your boat? Will you invite us to your house? You know what I mean? Like I always hear he's a friend, she's a friend. Friends come over to your private space. You know what I mean? And I listen to that piece. I'm not saying that every, person of color has been in my private space, but it's that term is thrown around. Yeah. You know what I mean? And I know that there's been conversations about me that have been leaked to me about, you know what I mean? Like where I am and what my role is and how I can only say certain things because of my color, the position I'm in and things like that. And, it's one of those things where, to your point, Irving, I wouldn't call it everyone's greatest fear. To me, it was just a reality. Like you expect people to think that of you. And so I think, Sean, actually, it was you that told me in my first standalone CEO role to remember that the board hired you for a reason and to keep that firm, whenever you do have those things. And unfortunately, I haven't had to deal with that as much as I did in previous organizations. But Sean, I always kept that close at heart whenever those type of things happen, is remembering someone knew my worth and my credibility, and that's why I'm here. So, yeah.
And the reason why
I learned that from my executive coach, a Black man, because I struggled with leading with my title in certain instances, because we all know how it is. You walk into a room, I want someone to treat me with respect because that's how you treat any person, not because you find out I'm the CEO and then you treat me differently. Well, what if I was the director of something and not the CEO. Well, that just doesn't bode well for me. So I had to get over that. And my coach is the one that was like, the board hired you for a reason. Lead, do what they expect you to do. So I had to get over that. So I pass that on whenever I can.
Thank you.
The reason why I said fear, Michelle, is because to me, it's a level of vulnerability and trust that we do to put ourselves out in these spaces. And so even where like obviously other Black people can do it, other people of color can do it. But typically in that case, the reason why I'm doing it is because I just don't like you. I think you stuck up. I think, it's something about you that I don't like, right? Whether right or wrong, it's something, it's more petty, whatever. I think when it's done by a white person in this context, the basis that you only got it, like you're not even going through stuff that you don't like about me. You're not even going that far. You're literally just saying, oh, it's just because of a D&I imperative that you got this. To me, that is the fear, because if I'm being vulnerable, and to your point, if I'm acting on Team Michelle with this person, I don't want to feel like I did Team Michelle and come to find out you did something like this.
Urban, you hit the nail on the head. The problem there with Rachel Nichols is that, all of the criteria, the education, the experience didn't matter. The only thing that mattered is because you're a woman of color. So that's why they gave you that role. And that's a problem, right? So whether we're talking about ESPN sports or we're talking about, the association sector and our leadership roles, you have to see me and you and Sean and Aliyah and everybody else on here as people who have worked hard, like Nicole Hanna, and they qualified to be in the position that they're in. And everything is not just handed to you because they're trying to fill another quota, right? A lot of us we're not quotas. We're people who are in competition, just like everyone else, trying to climb the career ladder and doing it the way that we need to do it. And it's not just because they're trying to fill another hole by putting a Black person or person of color in it. So I think that's the thing that just sticks me in that, oh, wow, well, they only got it because they were trying to fill another quota. And that is not a good way to look at things.
I agree. And it's also one of those things where we all know that these conversations like that happen all the time, and we can never prove it. And I think a lot of these hot mics have been coming out. Like with her situation, my understanding is that this conversation took place a year ago, and it had been circulating around ESPN. So to the other lady, I've forgotten her name, she was dealing with this for a whole year until another staff person leaked it. But these things happen all the time, and we know it. And I think that's the added stress that we have, is in trying to work to the best of our abilities, like Sheri was saying, and bringing our best selves to work, but also this nagging feeling on your shoulder that these conversations are taking place. And it's our added burden. And, maybe we should let it go, but we know it's happening. And so it's kind of, it's tough.
Hey, Catalyst calls that an emotional tax that we kind of carry, right? That this feeling that at times we have to prove ourselves in our setting. But I think that the definition of inclusion that I like is also from Catalyst, that I have this feeling that I'm being evaluated for my uniqueness, and that there's a sense of belonging to be on the team. And so I think that at the end of the day, that really is what an inclusive environment is, right? Where we are being evaluated, not being Black CEOs, et cetera, but it's Karl, it's Sean, it's Katrina, we are individuals, that we bring something unique to this. And at the end of the day, the validation that we get from our boards to kind of hire us is really at the end of the day what's there. And then of course our results speak for themselves.
That's what I was about to go to, Karl, because I think when we do have those amazing results, there's a sense of surprise in some instances. Like, can you believe she did that amazing thing? And it's sort of like, well, why not? She's great. She got the job, she's doing amazing work. So there's that. It's almost as if the bar has been lowered in some instances to get us in organizations or to give us opportunities. And then when we excel, it's this disbelief that we didn't have it in us to begin with. And that's frustrating.
Yeah.
Shout out to everybody in comments. I saw Monda, Natasha, some folks in there. Just thank you all for commenting. this is a good, I feel like we just kind of get revved up right toward the end when we always have to kind of close the show. But I think the Nicole Hannah-Jones topic is a great way to close, because a key piece of Nicole's essay and her response to her decision, which everyone needs to read the full entirety of it. Stefanie, Michelle, some folks quoted it. But a lot of it was about building institutions of our own, and not necessarily going into majority white spaces. And that essentially is what Text to Table actually has been. We didn't necessarily start it this way, but we definitely have kept it going, and it's a year strong. And so if you've been following us on social, we have been saying there's a special announcement that's happening of this episode as well, in addition to our co-host joining us. And so announcing today for everybody publicly that Dante, Sean, Michelle, and I have decided that we are going to pursue Text to Table as a 501c3 nonprofit organization in the vein of creating institutions of our own. And today we'll officially kick off our fundraising campaign. We're doing a fundraising campaign for the next 30 days, which is a startup. The funds that we're raising will be used to help cover our startup nonprofit costs. We've all personally contributed money over the last year as well, so we're asking people to join us so that we keep Text to Table going in through 2022, and then also allows us to work with some part-time consultants to actually think of the vision for what Text to Table to be, and providing more resources to the association and nonprofit community. So we've been going back and forth over the whole year about what was going to happen, and I think coincidentally, Nicole Hannah-Jones' piece just hit right in time, and we do think this is a moment to build institutions by us, for us, obviously with large community support. So that is the big announcement for today. So you will be hearing from us, all of our folks in the Text to Table community. We hope that you'll be able to support us.
Yes, help us take it to the next level. And we appreciate all of the support and all of the viewership. And now we need you to dig in your pockets and give us some money.
Yeah. It's been a year. I remember when we recorded our first episode on Zoom, we were just going to throw it up and just see what happens. I was like, oh my God, no.
Michelle keeps us classy. She's the one. I'm the one that's raggedy. Like, I just throw it up. Hold on, post it on my page.
I was like, Lord, no. So, shout out to the sisterhood and Greekdom and Delta Sigma Theta and all the sororities. You can always find somebody that can help you. And of course, Asura had a business who we've brought on the show many times for you all to see on Moxie Nashville with Vanessa and then Janae as well. So they have really helped us take this to another level professionally. They've created all of our marketing. And like Irving said, this has all been a personal passion project funded by us, but to really go to the next level. And we're so fortunate that we have colleagues in the association space who have offered free consulting for us to really help us focus and figure out how we can take this long term. And this is just the right way to do it. So we do ask you, and people always say, how do I get involved? What can I do? Money is a big factor in that. And that is something that we are looking for in our campaign. So we do ask that you go into your pockets, contribute whatever you can, dig deep, because these conversations aren't easy. Someone mentioned they're exhausting. They are. They are exhausting. It's almost 8:00 on where I am, and I left the house to come here. Anyway, so just to say that we do want to continue to do this, not for ourselves, but for the greater good of what it really provides for the community at large.
And we have not one surprise, but two. And to kick us off on our fundraising campaign, a big shout out to Avenue M and Sheri Jacobs, who is starting with a $1,000
yes.
Yay!
to launch our Text to Table fundraising campaign.
Thank you, Sheri.
Appreciate you stepping up and
so we're looking for matching gifts for that $1,000. Also, a special shout out to Lowell Applebaum of VistaCo, who has offered in-kind support to Text to Table throughout 2021 as well.
Absolutely. Thank you, Lowell.
Thank you, Lowell. Thank you, Sheri. The support from the association community, we can't thank you guys enough. So thank you.
All right, y'all gonna be hearing from us. You like, you got $1? And listen, and I grew up in the church. I will come with offering plates He will come virtually with an offering plate that he will get in your email as well.
Yes. Absolutely.
All right. Well, thanks to Stefanie, Karl, Aliyah, Katrina, Sheri, my girl Michelle, boy Sean, Dante, who was with us in spirit as well too. Always an awesome conversation. I'm sure y'all will be back at this time because Texas Table is going to keep it going. So we sure will have you back at some point in time. But thank you for giving your time and this great conversation. I feel like we just get started right toward the end. But thank you all in the Texas Table community, the support over the last year. Well, I feel like we should do a toast. Who wants to do a toast? Michelle, Sean, you want to do the toast?
Sean, why don't you do the toast?
Here's to one amazing year and a great future, whatever that looks like. It could be another 5 years, but we're going to keep pushing and keep going. So cheers.
Cheers.
Yes.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.